let's try something. Let's have everybody close their eyes so they can really focus on what I'm about to say. Close your eyes. Don't spill your beer. In your mind, picture an ale and picture a lager. Ale and lager. Okay, you can open your eyes. Did anybody picture yeast? Anyone? Yeast? That's the only difference between an ale and a lager is yeast. It's hard to picture yeast. It's microscopic. You kind of have to look through a microscope, and truthfully, lager yeast and ale yeast look kind of the same. But that's the only difference. Culturally and in terms of beer styles, lagers tend to be something that looks like this, or be from Germany or the Czech Republic, versus ales tend to be associated with American craft brewers, with English beers, with Belgian beers. But there's no reason that a Belgian couldn't make a lager or a German couldn't make an ale, and they do. It's just not the stereotype that you have associated with that. And so, like so many things in beer, the reason that lagers were predominantly brewed in one area and are predominantly brewed with a certain style of beer goes back to cultural and personal preference and economic reasons. If you were to make this beer with ale yeast, and there's no reason you couldn't, you could do exactly the same thing, but when it comes time to ferment this beer, instead of throwing in lager yeast, you would throw in ale yeast. It would be a lot tougher to drink because ale yeast tend to produce more fruity flavors. They're fermented at a warmer temperature, which encourages a yeast to produce esters. Esters are compounds that have fruity notes with them, versus lagers are fermented at a colder temperature, and they suppress a lot of those esters and other flavors that the yeast might produce. So if you could imagine this beer that's already tasting a little bit sweet and a little bit like corn with some fruit juice poured in there, I don't think that would be quite as popular. I think it would be a little bit too much sweet tasting, and definitely not what they were going for when they made Rainier. They were looking for a fermentation that accentuated the crispness. Does carbonation create that? No, but it's an aspect of it. Does being a lager or an ale make a beer drier? It contributes to it. Ales tend to be a little fuller on the mouthfeel versus lagers tend to be a little crisper and drier. And not in this beer, but in some lagers, you'll get a tiny bit of sulfur. That also is kind of a drying or almost a little bit of a note that clears the palate a little bit. So there you go, the difference between ales and lagers. Any